drizzle formed dark dots on the dirt beside the open hole as he pushed his shovel into the rich brown earth with his foot. A somber, solitary, middle-aged man in a black suit looked on with hollow eyes as he worked, the last of the day's mourners. Indeed, for more than an hour the stone-faced figure had stared down into the open grave as if by sheer force of will he could command the dead to rise. Out of respect, he had waited for more than an hour before approaching the grave, shovel in hand. The row of cars had long since pulled away, but as the skies darkened, he could wait no longer. Just the man in the black coat remained, fixated on the casket covered in white and yellow flowers at the bottom of that pit. A nod from the man in the black coat signaled that he understood. The grave had to be filled before the rain came in earnest. Gomez worked in silence. His family had been expecting him an hour ago. If it were not for the man in the black coat, he would be enjoying his wife's steaming menudo, shared with a child not that much younger than the one he was covering now with the soft dirt. He thought about how he would feel if that were his little Fatima that he were burying, understanding the black-coated man's pain, patting the last bit of dirt, forming a soft mound. The dirty, sweaty man stood back to give the black-coated man a little more room to grieve. Not once had he taken his eyes off of that hole, as though the world would end if he lost count of each new shovelful. Finally, it was time. "Mister, I have to go home now." Gomez waited for a bit, sensing that what was welling in the dark-coated man consumed him, like an acid eating away at his heart. Still, it seemed fitting to at least offer his sympathy before simply walking away. "I am very sorry, mister." A nod and the briefest of smiles served as the only thanks he could muster. Watching the old Mexican grave digger walk away, he felt nothing at all, in fact. Empty, devoid of anything that he wanted to feel. Sorrow, anger, guilt, anything would be all right. Before him, a child lay dead, and she deserved more than he had to offer her. Indeed, she lay dead because of what he hadn't given her. It was a cold early fall day in the Himalayan port town of Zhangmu. The first snow had fallen in the high mountains, visible to the north, and to the south the nation of Nepal. Also visible were the sharp green uniforms of the People's Liberation Army in greater numbers than normal. Zhangmu was a port town, popular with tourists and more modern than most, the showcase of the Communist Party of China and the entry point for official guests into the former nation of Tibet. The world press with their cameras and microphones were in abundance, official guests of the Chinese Communist Party to witness the transformation of Tibet into a modern nation. Karma squeezed her mother's hand as they walked into the central town square under the watchful eyes of police and army alike. For a 10-year-old raised in a temple, the sound and smells and noise of the first large city that she had ever seen were overwhelming. So many people, so many banners and street vendors and strange people dressed funny who looked nothing like her or her fellow monks. This was a celebration sanctioned and supplied by the People's Liberation Army, who had made sure that happy faces were everywhere to be photographed. But something was wrong. The flags and colorful banners didn't seem to cheer her mother as she glanced up to see her wipe tears from her eyes. Perhaps it was because of how rude the soldiers were, she thought to herself. Still, it was expected. Her mother was both Amma and Tibetan, and that was always enough to earn the disrespect of the Chinese army. "Mother, why are you sad? Where is father?" "He is with Munchadak. Major Chung is coming. Be quiet, Karma, please. Speak Tibetan only, no matter what happens," her mother pleaded. Karma had seen the small official woman around, but the stone-faced dragon, as her mother described her, seemed uninterested in children. Karma watched the short, fit woman, nearly her mother's age, march toward them with two taller green-clad and heavily armed soldiers in tow. In her dark olive-green uniform with black epaulets, with two thin gold stripes and a single star, Major Ching terrified her and everyone else who had ever seen the Major's cold, brutal efficiency. "Amapema, you don't seem to be enjoying the festival. Our leaders have gone to great lengths to please the people. Where is your smile? What I want to know is where your husband is. He needs to be here with you. That was the condition for him being here today." Karma looked into the smirking face of the woman, relishing her mother's fear as she stammered out excuses in broken Chinese. She grinned a bit as she remembered her father's observation that Major Chung, as short as she was, still always found a way of looking down on everyone. Chung wasn't the kind of political officer that accepted excuses and wasn't going to accept them now. Looking into Karma's face, Chung forced a smile, making the girl's blood run cold, as though she were a mouse caught in a cobra's gaze. Karma, what a lovely name. Surely you know where your father is, don't you? Your mother can't seem to remember, sweetie. Chung wasn't that much taller than she was. Still, if she responded in Chinese, her mother's lie would be exposed, so she smiled sweetly, irritating the impatient woman more. I know that you speak Chinese, Karma, so answer me, or I will have your mother arrested and shot. Political officer Major Lei Chung was not known for idle threats. A crowd of foreigners, as well as Tibetans and Chinese, had taken interest in the exchange, several with microphones, cameras, and what Karma had been told were cell phones. Tears welled, her mother's hand squeezing hers, and she knew that she had no good choice. Silence would condemn her mother as quickly as an answer. Alarm! Alarm! Behind the major on the steps of the administration building, flames and black smoke shot higher than the crowd. Panic, orders in Chinese. Crowds packing around the spectacle playing out on the other side of that line of people. She could not see, but the smell of gas, and something else that sickened her. A few women from the crowd had turned and escaped in horror. Excited voices in languages that she could not understand, and a few in the two that she could. Cell phones were held high to get the event on camera. Chung responded rapidly, shouting orders, directing men with buckets and hoses as they worked to extinguish the ghastly conflagration. The crowd disintegrated rapidly, except for a few clueless Westerners, as soldiers shouting threats knocked down anyone moving too slow or trying to record the day's unexpected main event. Mother Monk Chadak is on fire. Did the soldiers do that? Squeezing her hand, her mother seemed to be panicking, with her face contorted in horror. No, we will be arrested, all of us now. Run, Karma. Find a temple and tell them who you are. Leave now, please. Her mother pushed her away. But where would she go? Angry soldiers, like bees whose nest had been violently disturbed, pushed the crowd as individuals began to chant. She felt her knees go weak as a soldier in front of her slammed his rifle but into some foreigner's forehead, several shots ringing out from somewhere to her left. Karma could hear her mother pleading for her to go. But now all the sights and sounds, that awful stench of burning flesh left her dazed, like the world was moving in slow motion. Turning to run, she heard her mother's cry as several soldiers dragged her away. There was nowhere to go without something in the way. Trying to run, a hand grabbed her hair, pulled her from behind. Take this girl also. She had her chance to stop this. Now you will pay for your disloyalty, you little pig. Chung dragged the shocked girl to a nearly full truck where monks, Westerners, and AMA had been tossed. Karma felt her mother's arms wrapping around her as the other monks pushed her to the front of the truck. Prayers, groans, and cries as she tried to stand to help one of the monks whose nose had been smashed. The metallic sound of the truck's tailgate, followed by darkness, sent a shiver through the young girl as a sudden jerk knocked her off her feet. Karma closed her eyes. Her mother's arms wrapped around her as the bumpy ride to their shared fate. Major Chung, I am highly disappointed in you. You said that you would control your monks. Now I have this. The sour-faced senior general emphasized each word, his dagger-like gaze cutting through her as she stood at perfect attention in front of him. Laid out on his desk, forbidden Western newspapers, and a laptop he had turned toward her. American you watch and Western media have destroyed everything that the party hoped to achieve by our demonstration of kindness and respect. I believe that this one has you speaking to a poor, scared child. What were you thinking, Major Chung? The tall, balding man was clearly angry, and Lei could feel her knees go weak as his glare seemed to cut through to her soul as he pounded on his desk. She had not seen the camera, the clarity of her words, the horror on the child's face. Why had one of her soldiers not warned her? She wondered. A full 2-minute movie where she was the star. In the eyes of the Western world, Hers was the face of oppression, a trembling child the oppressed. Beijing is demanding answers. They want to know who is responsible for this incompetence. What shall I tell them, Major Chung? The celebration had been the general's idea, approved and ordered at levels well beyond her. Her participation included a list of excluded dissidents, only to be overruled. She looked at his hard eyes, knowing what he wanted to hear, knowing that her usefulness to him was now only as a scapegoat. I take full responsibility for Monk Chodok's death. The terrorist monks responsible for his murder are under arrest, sir. He smiled briefly, satisfied by her shaky answer. She was loyal at least, he thought. Excellent. Her confession would play well in his report. Exiling a low-ranking officer might satisfy the party. If not, Chung might still serve his needs. Major Chung, perhaps I have promoted you too rapidly. Perhaps I have given you too much responsibility. Perhaps you are too soft for this duty. Was I wrong in promoting you, Major Chung? Her career was over. At best, she would end up commanding a two-man station on the Mongolian border. It was the worst that bothered her. A quick, predictable trial followed by a quicker, equally predictable execution. No, sir, I am not too soft. Cursing herself for the squeak in her voice that belied her desperation. I will be harder, sir. We shall see. I am assigning you to be the commander of Jirong Prison. Its previous commander has disappointed me. He is not as fortunate as you to receive the second chance that you are now getting. Thank you, sir. I will not disappoint you again. How'd the interview go, Jack? Jordan was his brother-in-law and the local preacher. Not that he didn't have better ways to spend a Sunday. It had been a hard few months since the funeral for his daughter Alice, and it felt good to be among friends at Norm's Bar and Grill, home of the best barbecue and chili in Texas, or so Norm Rodriguez, the owner, claimed. Don't they have rules against preachers in bars, Jordan? The familiar face was welcome. Jack Robert Morgan had stared at that very expensive brown bottle for hours and hadn't broken the seal. Once he crawled in, the way out would be difficult. That first glass would mean defeat. It would mean that Harry had won. Like the others, that son of a bitch got to them first. I like your taste in bourbon, Jack, but I don't think Terry or Alice would much approve of you drinking your life away in this hellhole of a drinking establishment. Hey, barkeep, how many Nagas died to decorate this place? Screw you, preacher man. Either buy a drink or get out. That collar of yours is driving away business. Norm Rodriguez and Jordan Elliott had been friends for years, and yet not once had Jack ever heard a kind word between Norm the barkeep and his brother-in-law, Jordan, the local preacher. Like Lucifer and God competing for souls, they spared constantly. And keep your eyes off my sinners. Sipping the beer placed in front of him, Jordan, the tall, bald, transplanted Texan pretended not to notice the parishioners in the corner. A lovely couple had they been married to each other. So what now, Jack? Go back to the agency? Taking a deep breath, Jack had no other option. No, not a chance in hell. I've been dancing to that devil's tune way too long. If no one will hire me, I'll hire myself. I have the insurance money and an idea. What sort of idea, Jack? Norm had wandered over, standing beside his nemesis, the preacher man Jordan, flipping over the napkin he had been drawing on. Jack the engineer smiled. This, a closed-loop hydrogen fuel cell system for the home and business, takes its power from either solar panels, small windmills, or tide if you're close to the ocean, cracks water that feeds a fuel cell. It stores the hydrogen in the daytime and pumps out electricity all day and night long. So what? It means that you would never pay a power bill ever again, Norm. No one would. And make enough hydrogen. You never have to buy gas for your truck either. Efficient and clean. Terry always did say you was smart, Jack. If you need an investor, count me in. How long would it take you to build this gizmo? I have a full-size working prototype now. Haven't paid a power bill in 2 months. Now I'm going to scale it up. It can change the world. And best of all, no more building weapons for Harry and the NDRA, the National Defense Research Agency, secretly building everything from beams to destroy cities to area-sound weapons that can send 1,000 men into epileptic fits. The thought that he had participated in the madness at all made him nauseous. Jordan gazed at the drawing on the napkin, impressed but not entirely understanding the details. Had it been another man, he would have assumed that it was a con game, but not Jack Robert Morgan. Jack was an engineer and inventor, and by all accounts brilliant. That's the man my sister married, Jack. Terry loved you because you were a dreamer. You do this. It'll honor her memory and Alice's. And Alice's. It was a daft plan. Insanely crazy except for the fact that the engineering was perfect. All the parts were available, and it had been powering his house in the desert for months. Maybe it'll pay back the world for the evil crap I've invented. My Buddhist friends would call that karma, Jack. Remember your loyalties. I expect to see you in Sunday services this week. I have a special sermon on the sanctity of our wedding vows planned. Karma, that's what it is. What it's all about, Jordan. Karma. Karma, I'm so sorry that you are here with us. I should have left you in the temple with Amanima. The small, cold, crowded cell with gray, filthy walls had an open bucket in the corner that filled it with a horrific stench. Stroking the child's thick black hair, she wrapped her arms around the shivering, terrified, hungry young girl as she looked out the small cracked window at the stars above. The Chinese can't keep you here, so they will probably separate us in the morning. I won't leave you, Mother. I won't. Cries from the other cells, pleading of a woman being dragged from her cell down the hall. The laughter of guards and the sound of boots on concrete floors were punctuated by gentle conversation, concern for each other from her cellmates and the occasional smile to reassure her. None of this mitigated the agony of knowing that it was her decision that had condemned her daughter to this hell. Maybe tomorrow it will get better. The older woman that had been in the cell when she arrived finally spoke. Earlier she had offered a few saved morsels to her daughter, but Pema had declined it as taking food from anyone needing it so desperately themselves sickened her. The commander shot himself yesterday. Tomorrow the new commander will arrive. I heard the guards say that it is a woman. I'm sure that she will help your little Karma. The possibilities raced through Pema's mind, always coming back to the worst possibility of all. No. Please tell me that is not so. Please. It was someone named Ching, no Chung, a Major Ching I heard them say. Perhaps you can ask her for help. With Karma mercifully asleep in her arms, Pema bit down hard on the cloth of her robe to keep the girl from hearing her pain. If there had been hope, there was now none. As if her heart had been torn from her chest, she squeezed her daughter to her breast, begging silently that whatever fate had brought her to this moment she could endure alone, her tears caught by the matted black hair of her innocent daughter.